Lately, there's been a big change in Pokemon collectibles, and I think this trend will continue in 2026, and it all comes down to the illustrators behind the Pokemon cards. Though before I actually touch on that topic, I am actually gifting a subscriber this Ordino illustration rare. Now, if I do reply to your comment with this Milotic emoji, well done, this card is on its way to you. And hey, if you are a first timer here, welcome to the channel. My name's Phil, and I've been speaking about Pokemon cards in the general market, for nearly 2 years now, so definitely feel free to subscribe for consistent updates around Pokemon cards. But as I was saying, I've noticed a big shift with collectors gravitating towards the illustrators more than the Pokemon recently. And there seems to be like a big connection point with art collecting, and I think this is a maturing aspect of the Pokemon hobby. One thing about Pokemon collectors, and a lot of us watching, is that we're getting older, and the way we appreciate cards has changed a bit too, because as kids it was like, oh, it's a Charizard, how cool. But now there's like a level of appreciation for the artists behind the cards, and personally I actually feel this is a bigger shift, and one that creates far more longevity for the hobby. Because a lot of collectors now know of Shinji Kanda, who has become one of the most popular illustrators in the Pokemon TCG. And now there's a huge fan base who literally collect Shinji Kanda artworks, and they just patiently wait for each new, card that he releases. Shinji Kanda started their journey in the Pokemon TCG with Magma and Sark in Brilliant Stars, but these cards were only commons, but it wasn't until Lost Origin where Kanda actually got a chance to illustrate an alternate art, and that was their huge first success with the Lost Origin Giratina. Now this Giratina became a fan favorite, and then it quickly rose to become the second most desired card in the Sword and Shield era, right behind the Moonbryon. Though it wasn't until Paldea Evolved where Shinji Kanda would develop their well-known status, because here Shinji Kanda created another insanely popular card with the Magikarp illustration rare, and this is where a lot of collectors started waiting patiently for their next artworks. Shinji Kanda went on to create the Magneton Surging Sparks promo, the Roaring Moon in Prismatic Evolutions, along with Seismitoad in Black Bolt, and even recently the Oricorio special illustration rare in the Mega Charizard X Ultra Premium collection. But there's one thing that's standing out, and that is every Shinji Kanda artwork is becoming expensive and very sought after. It's really interesting because Seismitoad is a clear example of this, as it's not exactly a Pokemon that gets heads turning, yet Shinji Kanda's artistic influence created demand for that particular card, showing that there is a changing climate in the way people collect Pokemon cards right now. Right now it seems we're slowly approaching an era where it's not about what Pokemon is on the card, but rather who is creating the artwork behind the Pokemon. And I think that's a clear sign of a maturing audience who are showing deeper appreciation that extends past the Pokemon. Though it's not just Shinji Kanda. Even Akira Egawa has really taken the spotlight with their unique art style. Akira Egawa creates their full arts with a sense of power and works very well to convey in their illustrations, like a divine power within their Pokemon. And Akira Egawa actually illustrated the entire Crown Zenith Gold library, and these are some of the most unified and cohesive artworks as chase cards. That comes down to the fact that they're all created by the same illustrator. But there's a growing fan base that love collecting their artworks and fitting them all in one binder and just making an illustrator themed kind of collection. And I think that we're seeing more people collect just from the one illustrator. I'm even noticing now that cards are getting hyped before they even release, just because people know who the illustrator is. A recent example of this is Danciao. As of recently, more hype has been building for Danciao, and they are really leading the Mega Evolution era at the moment with their incredible artworks. Danciao's first full art was the Iron Valiant EX from Prismatic Evolutions, which was definitely an awesome artwork, though they really took it to another level with the Zekrom special illustration rare from Black Bolt, which is easily my favorite Zekrom card, though they've entered now a new level artistically with Mega Evolution era. Because for Inferno X and Phantasmal Flames, Danciao created the Mega Charizard special illustration rare, which I think is currently looking to be the greatest Charizard artwork ever created, though even with the upcoming Mega Dream EX set, the Mega Gengar is looking absolutely insane, and you can really see the similarity between the Zekrom, Charizard, and Gengar, and they are all finding this strong level of uniformity between their designs. And this change is becoming bigger and bigger, and more of an audience is growing for these illustrators, as collectors are now caring about the illustrators along with the Pokemon, and I think this is a very healthy change for the hobby. Now, there's always been collectors that have been very focused on the illustrator, but the big thing I'm seeing now is that it's kind of gone into the mainstream of the hobby. It used to be far more dedicated collectors would be, you know, very focused on the artists and the illustrators. And, you know, the mainstream would just care about, oh, is that Pokemon card a chase card? Oh, is that a cool Pokemon? But now I've noticed the shift where now the mainstream of the collecting and, you know, people that just entered the hobby, now they're actually getting drawn into the illustrators. I mean, I think a big moment I noticed this personally is when I sold a card from Paradox Rift to someone, and then they asked me, hey, by any chance, do you have the Surskit from Yoriyuki Ekagami as well? And when I looked at the creations from Ekagami, I noticed that nearly all of their library is grass type Pokemon, and they almost specialize in like grass type Pokemon. They illustrated the entire Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Venusaur line in Pokemon 151, and they've got this like cool grass and petal themes with their artworks. I mean, you can even see that in Gardenia's Vigor from Crown Zenith. And I think there's gonna be a big shift in 2026 and beyond with the love for illustrators within Pokemon TCG. And I honestly think this is gonna expand the hobby because sure, I mean, Gengar and Charizard are always gonna be desired, right? If they're a top chase card. It's just part of Pokemon. Though I feel we're gonna enter a new world, especially in 2026, and we're gonna see this in the future, where Pokemon cards are gonna be more kind of sought after because of the illustrator rather than the Pokemon. And I really think that's when the hobby is gonna be taking a level up in terms of longevity along with passion, because we are seeing the small movements here, you know, Seismitoad and the Solosis from Black Bolt as well, because, you know, Solosis was created by the same illustrator as Bubble Mew, and then it became very hyped because of that. But I don't think we've seen the full extent of this as of yet, because, you know, even though a lot of collectors have had appreciation for particular artists, we're now seeing this become far more commonplace because, you know, even before cards released, you know, a big discussion point is who the illustrator is. And, you know, this is an area I'm going to be monitoring a bit more because the Pokemon world is filled with incredible illustrators. And honestly, I think it's about time that the people designing these cards get more appreciation than the Pokemon themselves. I mean, they're the ones creating whole worlds with these artworks, showing us sides of Pokemon that we've never seen before. And honestly, I think illustration rares and special illustration rares are the big reason for this change, because this rarity of illustration rares have actually created such a positive shift in Pokemon's TCG, and it's allowed artists to express themselves across a full canvas. You know, rather than just cropping their artworks in a small frame like, you know, Pokemon cards were for such a long time. And personally, I think this is a big reason why the Pokemon TCG is leagues above others. You know, and I was mentioning it before, but the fact that, you know, Pokemon like Oricorio and, you know, Seismitoad are becoming so wanted in Pokemon collecting, that isn't because these Pokemon are desired, okay? That's all because of Shinji Kanda. Now, Shinji Kanda is one example of this, but we have Danciao as well showing such awesome artworks as well. Now, Danciao has really had a good run because, you know, they've had Zekrom, you know, Charizard, and of course Gengar as well. You know, these are very popular Pokemon. But what happens if Danciao releases another artwork of a Pokemon that's not that popular, right? Like, what if they release a really awesome Relicanth artwork? Would that make Relicanth become a top chase card because of Danciao? That's the shift I'm seeing right now. And, you know, I think this is why Pokemon, because they, you know, really trust their artists and, you know, they've put in so much kind of focus on, you know, developing them and, you know, giving them creative freedom. It's created such a big difference with Pokemon from other kind of TCGs. I mean, Dragon Ball is such a big example of this. And I talk about Dragon Ball a lot on this channel because I like collecting it personally. But one of my gripes with it is that a lot of Dragon Ball cards, you know, a lot of the time, it just feels like it's a Goku and Vegeta, just like a picture frame of them, you know, stamped on a card. And it's just like, hey, here's a Vegeta or Goku card, okay? You don't really get that feeling of, you know, Goku or Vegeta in a crazy kind of battle environment. It's rare that they do that. And whether that's a licensing issue or whether that's because, you know, there's so much approvals that need to go through, Pokemon's taken a very different direction where it's like, hey, we're letting these illustrators really express themselves with these Pokemon in a ways that, like, a lot of people haven't even seen Pokemon look like this in video games or any other area, right? And that's such a big risk that they're doing because they're trusting these illustrators, you know, to really kind of bend the rules of what's possible with these Pokemon artworks, and it's delivering beyond belief. And this is why there's such a big shift in the hobby. And that's why I think there's such a big shift with the kind of desire and love for illustrators at the moment. But, you know, while this is an interesting movement for the hobby, I do think there is a question that comes up about the quality of Pokemon cards. And I mean, Pokemon cards are really excelling at the moment, though it seems the video games have been consistently delivering below fans' expectations. And I actually reveal what I mean in this video here about that topic. Within this video on screen, I go deep into the world of Pokemon and explain the huge difference in quality with the TCG versus the video games. And, you know, you can see what's been happening as of late. I recommend you click on that video that's currently appearing on screen and you can learn more about that topic there. Appreciate you watching and I'll see you on the next video.